Hello everyone. Today we are going to travel back in time to the late 13th and the early 14th century to meet one of the most important painters in history, Giotto di Bondone. Giotto's work was revolutionary and changed the course of art history. He was the father of Italian art and influenced how artists started portraying the world around them. By the end of this lesson, you will understand why his art was so significant. Giotto was born in a small village called Colle di Vespignano around 1277 to a family of small landowners. Hello everyone. Today we are going to travel back in time to the late 13th and the early 14th century to meet one of the most important painters in history, Giotto di Bondone. Giotto's work was revolutionary and changed the course of art history. He was the father of Italian art and influenced how artists started portraying the world around them. Giotto was born in a small village called Colle di Vespignano around 1277 to a family of small landowners. Some people believe his name is a nickname for Ambrogio or Angelo. Giotto showed an incredible talent for drawing from a very young age. And, as a child, he used to draw pictures of sheep on stones with charcoal. According to the legend, the great painter Cimabue saw Giotto drawing this sheep and was so impressed that he immediately took him as his own apprentice. Giotto's skill in drawing was so impressive that he gained a reputation very quickly, and soon everyone in Florence and beyond was talking about him. Giorgio Vasari, one of the most famous 16th century painters, architects, and art historian, tells how Giotto was able to draw a perfect circle without a compass, the Giotto's famous O. According to this legend, Pope Boniface VIII, in the process of announcing the Jubilee of 1300, was looking for an artist to commission his own portrait, and it was suggested the name of Giotto, who had already distinguished himself for the crucifix of Santa Maria Novella in Florence. During a meeting with the Pope's curator, Giotto drew a perfect circle freehand on a canvas to prove his skill. So Boniface VIII was immediately convinced that he was the right person for that job. Vasari tells us also that Cimabue wanted him as an apprentice after discovering his skill at drawing sheep with charcoal on a stone. Giotto had spent his childhood among the animals on his parents' farm, so sheep had no secrets for him. Giotto was said also to be a pretty funny person. Legend has it that Giotto played a prank on his master Cimabue. He painted a fly on a panel the master was working on. It was so realistic and lifelike that Cimabue, returning to his work, tried to swap it away. Around 1287, he married Ciuta di Lapo del Pela, and they had 4 daughters and 4 sons, one of whom, Francesco, became a painter himself. Giotto opened a workshop in which he was surrounded by students, and he was mainly responsible for the design of the works and for the most important compositions, leaving the less important ones to his pupils. He overcame the abstractionism of Byzantine art by reappropriating natural reality, organizing scenes with realism and creating groups of figures talking to each other in a space immersed in the third dimension, giving it depth. The naturalism of Giotto ensures that the figures are always highly expressive, representing the human figure with a plasticity reminiscent of sculpture. One of his most important masterpieces is the Crucifix of Santa Maria Novella, made between 1290 and 1295. For the first time here, Christ on the cross is represented as a real man, suffering and dying, leaning on the cross. On the two sides of the cross are painted the Virgin Mary and Saint John. While at the top, in the red rectangle, are the insignia of Christ itself. At the bottom, we see a trapezoidal base on which is painted a rock and a skull. They represent the Golgotha, also known as Calvary. Contrary to the reality of the crucifixion, the nails are in the palm and not in the wrist. This convention is part of the earlier iconographic tradition. However, Giotto's Christ is not a Christus triumphans, as in the Byzantine and Romanesque tradition, but a flesh and blood person suffering on the cross, called a Christus patiens, which means suffering Christ. Giotto's painting anticipates the figurative culture of the Renaissance with its realistic, expressive and three-dimensional images, animated by everyday and natural details. Another worldwide famous artwork by Giotto is the Scrovegni Chapel. It was consecrated on the 25th March 1305 as a chapel oratory dedicated to Santa Maria della Carità. Today it is considered one of the masterpieces of Giotto. He arrived in Padua in 1303, and the Order of Friars Minor invited him to paint a series of frescoes in the Basilica of Saint Anthony. Enrico Scrovegni intercepted him and commissioned him to decorate the chapel inside the gardens of the arena. Scrovegni was the richest man in Padua, and Giotto completed the cycle of frescoes in the Scrovegni chapel with great speed. It was finished in less than 2 years. Here, Giotto creates an example of antelitteram perspective. Father figures are represented as smaller. These attempts are not the result of geometrical calculation, but of his own intuition. That's why we call it intuitive perspective. The most famous example is the two choirs in the chapel. Giotto conceived the walls as the pages of a book, to be read from left to right and from top to bottom. The Last Judgment, painted here by Giotto, is the model for all the universal judgments painted in the later centuries, including the Michelangelo's one in the Sistine Chapel. He used a single scaffolding to cover the entire chapel, rather than many separated ones, as was the custom at the time. This is an evidence of his organizational skill and his iron control of the site and his attention to every detail of the work. The technique he used is the fresco painting. It is a very old technique. It is painted with mineral pigments diluted in water on fresh plaster. In this way, once the plaster crystallizes, the color is completely absorbed. Giotto's narrative is simple and informative, making the complex theological thinking of the story easy for everyone to understand. The faces of the characters convey universal emotions such as joy, sorrow, weeping, or wonder. In addition to Padua and Florence, he also worked in Rimini, Assisi, and Naples. Finally, he returned to Florence, where in 1334 the city authorities appointed him master builder of Santa Maria del Fiore and absolute superintendent of the municipal works. He was entrusted with the Florentine cathedral and the construction of the city walls, with a salary of about 100 florins per year. He began to work on the bell tower he designed, which was to take his own name, the famous Campanile of Giotto, although the final realization did not faithfully comply with his initial wishes. On Wednesday, the 8th of January, 1337, he died in Florence, leaving the cycle of frescoes in the Palazzo del Bargello unfinished. He was then buried with great honors and at municipal expense in the Cathedral of Santa Reparata.